Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our seminar. It is a great pleasure to introduce Professor Paola Inverardi, the first speaker in our seminar series on socio-technical resilience of autonomous systems. Paola is a professor at the Department of Information Engineering, Computer Science and Mathematics at the University of L'Aquila in Italy. And she is a distinguished researcher who has made major contributions to the application of formal techniques to the development of software systems. She received a Distinguished Service Award from the IEEE Technical Committee on Software Engineering and numerous other distinctions, including honorary doctorates from universities in Japan and Sweden. She is a member of the ACM Europe Council and Academia Europaea. In recent years, Paola's research interests have expanded to include ethical and privacy concerns of autonomous systems, and her seminar today will focus on her recent research in this area. Paola.
Attention on what is the scope of self? What do we mean with self? And then I will cast this discussion in the context of a digital society. I mean, the society we live today, and that the digital society with this population of autonomous systems requires an approach which is ethical, that takes into account values. We will discuss values of which kind of values are we talking of, or we want to be concerned of. Then I will try to tell you how, what is our approach of embedding ethics in autonomous systems. And the center here is the human being. We'll discuss digital ethics, and I will give you a motivating example, a simple example that illustrates, I think, our point. And then I will talk about the project we are involved since some time and the challenges that we are facing. So first of all, motivations, no? I mean, autonomous systems are autonomous in making decisions, and these decisions, there is nothing bad in that, except that we are facing systems that more and more take decisions on behalf of potential users or proactively concerning the user. So while historically we were thinking of autonomous systems as systems that were, increasing their contextual capabilities of capturing the context, they were eliminating the need of a human, a controller, and then becoming autonomous. Now what we have is that these systems go beyond that, just sensing the context, and then they tend to invade the user prerogatives. I will try to be clear on what I mean by user prerogatives. And in particular, they might, depending on the nature, property, and use of the information that this kind of system manage, they can impact on the moral rights of the users. And here, when I talk of users, I mean individuals, groups, or the society as a whole. The concern is, and emerged in general at the very beginning, about personal data, and it was therefore more oriented to privacy. However, as we will see, very soon it scaled up to more general values, and then to ethics in general. Just let me recall all of you that privacy is just one dimension of ethics. Now, privacy emerged with large-scale availability of personal data that were processable in an automatic way. There have been different approaches to control or to deal with privacy concerns, philosophical, of course, regulatory in terms of laws, and technical, what we have done in terms as computer scientists in order to enforce privacy concern. As I said, it is an ethical dimension. So from a philosophical perspective, just to remind, but privacy is related to personal information of which we want to exercise direct and unconditional control concerning its diffusion and disclosure. And that's what the philosophical perspective tells us. But actually, this is also what tells us the regulatory perspective. And here I am referring to Gdpr, which is in operation in Europe, included UK, because it was it was in operation since May 2018. It is actually the most advanced regulation all over the world concerning privacy, and concerning privacy in terms of protection of natural persons, regarding the processing of personal data and the movement of this data, I just reported here Article 1 because, I mean, Article 1 says this regulation protects fundamental rights and freedoms of natural persons, and in particular, their right to the protection of personal data. So it's actually the statement that privacy is a fundamental right. And GDPR also deals not only with processing and with exchange, but also with filing and saving data. Now, then we have the technical perspective, what most of us have been concerned with. We all know about privacy by design that provides high-level guidelines in the form of principles for designing privacy-preserving systems. Actually, this is a contribution that does not come from computer scientists, but social sciences. And we have, in general, historically implemented privacy preferences through the use of permission systems that comprise both the specification of access policies to pieces of data and their enforcement. And there have been many attempts to involve the user in order to make more friendly the setting of the systems towards privacy. I must say that we are not yet to that point of being friendly enough, and a demonstration is the annoying web pages that come up when you actually the messages that you get when you try to access a web page, and it is because of GDPR that asks you to set or to give your consent to accept cookies or not. But I'll come back to that in a while. Then there have been a lot of research, for example, requirements engineering, and not only about privacy persona, that is a way of characterizing groups of users by privacy preferences. And very recently, there was an article on New York Times, January 19, that was talking about privacy assistant. So what actually is emerging in order to deal with privacy concerns in the digital that might be either virtual or human. And it is interesting because it's actually a small piece that is emerging in practice of what we had in mind when we first proposed the project. I will tell you at the end. So, but ethics, so how do we scale from privacy to ethics? There has been a lot of work in Europe about this issue. And here I just have a sentence that comes from the European Group on Ethics in Science and New Technology. And it dates to 2018. And I'm not reading all of it, but I'm just saying that there is a worry on these advances in AI, robotics, and so-called autonomous technologies, and that there is a need for a reflection, a collective reflection and dialogue that focuses on the values around which we want to organize society. And we are talking about the digital society, the society that we are facing now and in the future, and the role that technologies should play in our society. So, I mean, it's really a reflection on values, or more general values, what is ushered by these technologies, and how we can protect or made more robust our society against possible lack of attention in these ethical dimensions. So, we have been a lot talking about more extreme cases. No, the autonomous car case, it's well known. We have been discussing. It's very popular. It's very, it's also something that goes very nicely on a newspaper, and we can have conversation about the future, talking about autonomous driving, but and ethical problems. And the autonomous car case is a classical example of ethical problems that have been faced in the way philosophers have been always talked about these issues through what is called the trolley problem. That is, I have a slide on the trolley problem just to show what it is. I mean, just confronting people with extreme scenarios, and then see their reaction, and then try to classify their reaction in terms of an ethical profile. Now, for autonomous car, there has been a lot of debate. There is still debate. It started, a few years ago. And there is the usual question, okay, shall the car be completely autonomous in face of these extreme problems, or shall we leave to the person who is on board of the car some kind of control? And this is something which go on and on without just like adversary teams, but no real. There are a lot of arguments, but not really convincingly. We will try to give our contribution to that, and try to understand which piece of control it might be useful to leave to the user of the technology rather than to the technology at all. So the trolley dilemma is, okay, I told you, just face these extreme problems, see the reaction, and the original problem was trying to correlate the reactions with one of 5 ethical paradigms. So we can think of these paradigms like profiles of people. Depending on how they answer and how they react, they can be classified in one of these classical profiles. Actually, I forgot to tell you that there was this very nice experiment. I don't know how many of you have tried it out. I did. I participated to the Meet Moral Machine experiment, and it was published, the result, on Nature in October 2018. I know that it is controversial, but it's very interesting that it has been a sort of very large scale experiment in the field in terms of concerning ethics. So it was like a large scale experiment like the trolley problem, with a set of scenarios, trying to understand if there might be a chance to have a universal machine ethics, a machine ethics that could actually reflect the way the largest amount of people would react in presence of an extreme scenario. Unfortunately, the maybe one could expect it. This didn't come out. So there is no universal machine ethics. I mean, people react differently depending on the society they live with, and their culture, and so on and so forth. It's very interesting experiment, however. So, I mean, we live in this digital society, and we know that a lot of rights might be in danger, and it's not only, you know, like the problem of autonomous car, it's problem of social media. You see the power of social media in elections. We have seen it, and we continue to see it. It's very interesting. As this morning, I just saw a figure on how much the different emerging people in the parties in Italy spend on advertising they messages on Facebook. And it is very interesting, by the way. So, and then, of course, there is an economic effect and then a political one. But this is unavoidable. I mean, I think that we cannot say, okay, it cannot be. We have to understand how we can cope with it. So there are many initiatives going on. GDPR, I already said. Autonomous driving, there are many initiatives also at the level of legislation. There is this foreseen and expected AI legislation. There are contributions by the scientific societies. There are institutional contributions. Where we have a flourishing set of groups at various levels that actually say something about this issue. The last one has been the white paper on artificial intelligence that came out from the European Commission in 2020, and the high-level expert group in artificial intelligence that drafted these ethic guidelines for the magic word trustworthy AI. Now, just let me say something. There is this huge stress on AI, which of course makes sense because AI is the enabling technology, but I think that the real problem is autonomy, is the fact that the system can make decisions in autonomy and can make decisions on your behalf, on behalf of a user. Whether the system is fueled with AI or not, that doesn't really make sense. So the problem is actually the autonomicity. Now, as a matter of fact, autonomicity is 90% possible because of the use of AI, but I think it's useful as scientists to make a distinction. Otherwise, we run into problems. Now, so we need an ethical approach. And already in 2015, one of these advisory boards, actually the data protection board, the one that was then launching the GDPR, said that there is the fundamental right to privacy and the protection of personal data as core elements in the new digital ethics. So it comes out with notion of digital ethics, which is necessary to preserve human dignity. Okay, here we start introducing this concept of human dignity, which is a fundamental right of human being. And then the opinion says that this need calls for a big data protection ecosystem, so it shall involve developers, businesses, regulators, and individuals in order to provide future-oriented regulation, accountable controllers, privacy-conscious engineering, and empowered individuals. And our project is focusing on empowered individuals, but all the others are, of course, targets of important that are very important as well. So the ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI came out with 5 recommendations, and these 5 recommendations touch different dimensions of the problem. So, okay, the first one is respecting the rule of law, of course. No, they have to be, let's say, in Europe, GDPR compliant. They have to be being aligned with agreed ethical principles and values, including privacy, fairness, human dignity. Keeping us, the humans, in control. Ensuring the system's behavior is transparent to us, its decision-making process explainable, and being robust and safe, also when the things can go wrong. So, I mean, these are the 5 high-level recommendations that are that should be followed by the developers. So how can we embed now, let us come on how we can embed ethics in autonomous systems. And of course, here I will have our perspective of our project. So our project focuses on the principle of human dignity, which is understood as the recognition of the inherent human state being worthy of respect, and that must not be violated by autonomous technologies. So, I mean, we take this as the golden principle, but will lead us, led us and will lead us in producing our technologies. So this means that the humans are not just components of a system. Humans are actors in a digital world and they become autonomous systems themselves that interact or pair with all the other systems. It means that we need to empower the user. We need to left the user from a passive to an active role. And of course, this requires an architectural approach. It requires that we look at the digital world in architectural terms. Not only because I've been working in software architectures in the last 30 years, but although this helps, of course. So the human at the center, again, something more. Accept or non-accept options do not satisfy our freedom of choice. I mean, at present, we are facing this kind of problem, that we can either accept the interaction with a system or not accept. But there is no way that we can make visible to the autonomous systems what are our individual preferences and moral views. And the reason is that the individuals are unprotected in this world. We cannot operate at the same level of expertise with an autonomous systems. We are not empowered enough. And this means that moral values like individuality and responsibility are at risk, because we tend to either say yes or no, but no way to express exactly what we want. Just think about, again, think about the proxy and the settings. So how many of you really say accept, not accept, accept all, or no, I want to look at it, and then you discover, but actually you have not too many choices to look at. And once you have done it one time, you are not going to do it for others several times. No, if you have to interact with 3 or 4 or 5 different websites in one search. So you end up saying accept or I don't accept. And this is not exactly what we would like to have. So how can we shape the kind of customization that we might want to impose to an autonomous system, so that the autonomous systems so that we are assured that the autonomous systems interacting with us will actually respect our preferences, our moral views. We use the notion of digital ethics as proposed by Luciano Floridi, and maybe in a slightly simplified form, since we're not philosophers, but computer scientists. So the way we understood it is that digital ethics can be split in two parts: hard ethics, that is defined and enforced by digital legislation, but legislation is necessary, but it's insufficient, and it does not cover everything, nor it should do. I mean, actually, we are not expecting the legislation is covering all the space of decisions that a human being can do. And soft ethics is the space of moral decisions that is left to the actors in the digital world. It deals with the open space in which you can exercise your moral preferences, and you can actually exercise your right of freedom of decision. And what we speculate, and we are working in that direction, is that soft ethics is exactly what can be sorry, I didn't switch off my phone. What we have to follow in order to achieve a moral agreement in between the user and the autonomous systems. But I will come to that very quickly, hopefully. So just a small example, just because you might say, okay, so, but what are these choices, moral choices that you want to exercise? Just let me give a small example. So we have a parking lot in a big mall. We have two autonomous connected vehicles, A and B, with one passenger each. And the two cars are competing for the same parking lot. Passenger in A has an F problem. A and B are rented vehicles, so they are multi-user, and they have a default decision algorithm. The algorithm in this case says that the cars will look for the free parking lot that is closer to the point of interest. In case of contention, the closest car gets in. Now, A and B are approaching the parking lot, B is closer, therefore it will take the parking lot. And this seems fair enough. However, suppose that by communicating with A, passenger in B receives the information that passenger in A has health problems. Now, should passenger B follow her ethics, which is a virtue ethic, she would decide to leave the parking lot to A. This is what we do, for example, when we leave a seat in a bus. If we are sitting and somebody gets in and looks that it might need the seat more than you. Not everybody does it. There is no law that says that you have to do that. It's your moral attitude. Somebody may want to do it, somebody else may not. It's what makes us different. It's what makes us individuals. So this use case shows many things. First of all, that personal privacy is strictly connected to ethics. By disclosing a personal information like having health problem, the passenger in A follows an utilitarian view, which is related to the expectation that surrounding drivers might have virtue personal ethics. And this is what we do when, I don't know, I know that in UK there is a special pin that pregnant women can carry, can have just to go around and signal that they are pregnant. They do not have to do that. Why do they do that? They do that because they think that it might, they are following an utilitarian view that this might no, make their life easier if they meet people who have a virtue personal ethic. Individuals have different ethics also depending on the context. And this is true. I mean, our moral attitude is a constant flux among norms, utilitarian assessments of consequences, and evaluation of virtues. And a decision policy that seemed fair, the one that the car which is closer get in, does not correspond to a personal ethic. And by the way, it seemed fair to whom? To the developer, not to the driver or the person on board. So what do we learn from this example? The idea is that putting human at the center requires to have a certain level of customization, of enforcing of the decisions of the autonomous systems. Now, we postulate that this level corresponds to the soft ethics of each individual. So basically, we are saying that soft ethics shall live on top and be consistent with hard ethics. Individuals use different ethics depending on the context, also regarding their personal data. So what else we do learn? We learn that soft ethics is associated to the autonomous system individual, and hard ethics to the computer-fueled systems, for example, the autonomous car. We also understand that the two need to combine when they interact. So they have to come to a sort of moral agreement, whether it is that the autonomous vehicle accommodates consistently the user ethics on board, or if they actually engage in a protocol that might be more complex. It focuses on interactions of independent systems, and this is at the architectural level because actually we are just manifesting observable actions. We are black box in terms of systems. And this also puts architectural requirements on the autonomous systems. The autonomous systems, in order to accommodate user preferences, has to be built in a way that can adapt, can be flexible enough in terms of the ethical decision that it might take. Now, basically, I mean, what I said, we have autonomous systems. They should be programmed to allow the representation of soft ethics, and they have to be programmed to comply with hard ethics. So if you are selling a system in Europe, it has to be GDPR compliant. No way. Huh? Then, so it has to comply with the law. But if it is flexible in the sense that actually tries to respond to the human dignity principle, then it has also to be programmed to allow a certain degree of customization in terms of the soft ethics, the moral attitudes of the user it interacts with. Okay, so how do we model? So first problem is, okay, so soft ethics is not trivial. Soft ethics is, in terms of moral preferences, it means that we have to be able to model what is or what are the moral preferences of an individual. How do we approach the problem? You certainly know that there is a huge literature of machine ethics, way of representing the logic, usually normative systems, normative logics, and implemented in a variety of formal languages, formal logic languages. What we thought is that, I mean, by definition, soft ethics is not normative. It's by definition. I mean, it has to be flexible. And it is not Bayesian. I mean, it's not that we flip a coin when we say, okay, it's either this or something else. So we actually, the philosophers in our team, propose to use dispositions, which is a philosophical tool, let me say, and dispositions are those properties that individuate the causal behavior of the entities that possess them. So, I mean, in some sense, they are very natural in representing the tendons, exactly, the disposition. They dispose towards their manifestations, which occur when some conditions are met. So the need of an individual to manifest a moral choice can be seen as the stimulus that makes her disposition manifest. But of course, the disposition remains there and can also be not manifested. It's not always manifested. When it manifests, then it makes the concrete appearance. Then we are thinking of going from the modeling of disposition of a soft ethics of a user in terms of dispositions to specification patterns that design, identify representative solutions for a class of ethical problems. So by focusing on precise domains in our project, we think that it can be relatively easy to come up with a set of specification patterns, of ethical patterns that describe recurrent moral problems that can appear in that domain. So here I have an example of how it could be possible to express in terms of dispositions and then in terms of pattern, two properties of the two ethical attitudes that are manifested in the parking lot example. So software architecture, you all know, and I can just go very quickly, but basically, I mean, software architecture from a design point of view means that we are focusing on interactions, and that interactions are not just exchange of messages, are more complex protocols, can follow more complex protocols that describe the ordering in which interface operation can be executed. Connectors are architectural elements that define how components protocols can match together in order to communicate. And mediators are versions of connectors that are able to also embed an adaptation of the protocols so that a communication that in principle could not be possible actually can be achieved. So about the space of decisions of the autonomous system. So, I mean, what are the problems here? I mean, this is very well known. You know, when you talk about moral agents or in general in the robotic field, of course, the autonomous system takes decision that results in action. Depending on the context, the actions have an ethical implication or can have an ethical implication. So, I mean, in the context of our example in the parking lot or in general in the automotive domain, push the brake in presence of a red traffic light is obviously, you know, responding to an hard ethic requirement. Push the brake to avoid running on people crossing the street. It doesn't respond to the law in the sense that I mean, when you are facing some kind of extreme scenario, like in the trolley problem, and you cannot avoid either running on one person or a group of persons, so things like that. But of course, the ethical implication of the pushing the brake are very different in the two cases. So actions are, of course, finite. Context are potentially not finite, but in practice, you can, given the domain, make it discrete, or at least group them in a certain set of categories. So, I mean, this is, I think, well known in certain domain, typically in the robotic domain. Here, in this case, it means that working in precise domain, you can actually derive from the soft ethics, the moral attitude, and the interactions with the hard ethics of the system in a given domain, you can actually be able to decide if a given action has an ethical implication or not. So I already said this a little bit. How and when do you decide if an action has an ethical implication? Here I'm showing the architecture of a moral agent that was reported in this nice paper by Benzmuller, Parenta, and Van der Torre, which is designing normative theories for ethical and legal reasoning, and actually presents a way to implement a logic framework that might allow to make ethical deductions by starting from a set of theories. But what is interesting here for me is the architecture that you see here. You see here you have the AI reasoner, then the AI reasoner will produce the action to perform. The action gets in the explicit ethical reasoner, and then the action will be released or not, depending if it passes the ethical filter or not. And this construction is very similar to what we proposed sometime earlier than this paper in the project that we are working on, and where there is a filter in between the system and the user, and to some extent the action of the system is filtered through the moral preferences of the user. So the project that we are working on, it's called Exosol. The idea is to empower the user with a software exoskeleton that mediates the interactions with the digital world according to the soft ethics preferences. We aim at producing pieces of software that can be deployed on pieces of the exoskeleton that can be deployed on the devices that the user uses in order to interact with the digital world, whether it is a PC or a smartphone or an autonomous car. So basically in our framework, this is the structure. We have a user with the her soft ethics and the exoskeleton that is a sort of a software filter that architecturally it is a connector, software connector that allows to mediate the interaction with the autonomous system. I don't go too far in that because I'm running out of time, but I mean, just think this is an architecture of an automotive architecture. Basically, in the decision and control component, we assume that it's implemented, are implemented the hard ethics decisions. Then if the architecture wants to be flexible towards the user, then it has to provide interfaces for user personalization that have to be situated in between the decision and control, so part of the decision and control, and the sensor part of the structure of the architecture. So if you imagine that you have one person that gets on board, and the yellow around the person is the exoskeleton that realizes the preferences interface, then when it gets on board, it gets with its software exoskeleton. And then when it gets on board, if the architecture is flexible, then there will be the creation of a connector or mediator that represent the customization, the customized interactions through the moral preferences of the user with respect to what is embedded in the car. And of course, in the car, there are actions that are obeying hard ethics and cannot be discussed, but there are also actions that follow the default ethics of the car, that, like in the case of a parking lot. Okay, this is the architecture and the methodology. I just skip that, I just go to challenges. So challenges, first one is express the soft ethical preferences. What we are doing is following a top-down and bottom-up approach. So we start from describing ethical categories in terms of dispositions and specification patterns. And in doing that, we are looking at many different sources in social psychology, in privacy, persona, descriptions, and several other possible inputs. Then we are also, the idea is that that the profiling the moral soft ethics of a user starts from a profiling more or less like the ethical, like the moral machine, and then on top of that can be refined through practice, just monitoring what the user does in its everyday life. Then the challenge is to automatize the production of these pieces of the exoskeleton. Another challenge is to design the system self-boundaries to hard ethical decisions. Let me clarify something. If let us make an example. A system is GDPR compliant. Okay. The way a system implements compliance with GDPR can be very different. So, for example, the system can actually not look at data of a user at all. This is very strict, but also very, very rough. Or there might be another implementation where the system can accept and can look at data of the user, but then it has to follow a protocol in which it asks the user to consent and so on and so forth. Or it cannot be GDPR compliant if the system is not operating in Europe. So there might be very different ways of implementing something. Okay, so something which is important is how do we build soft ethics on top of hard ethics? How can we manage to consistently do that, depending on what is the soft ethics of the user? So the second challenge is that this is a multidisciplinary effort across different disciplines and inside computer science. In our team, we have philosophers, we have a sociologist, we have software engineers, we are a logic person. And of course, the other challenge is to increase awareness in users and system producers. But this is something which is it's really becoming, when we started working on this project, that was 2018, it looked like very visionary. Now it's really something that we can find in the press almost every day. So this is my team, the team that works with me, and I have the pleasure to work with them. And so you may see that there are 3 groups. First group is computer scientists. Second group are philosophers. The third one, I missed the sociologist, by the way. The third one is my current PhD student, who is actually listening the talk. And he is the perfect match because he has a degree in philosophy, but he has a background in computer science before the degree in philosophy, the master degree in philosophy and communication science. And now he is working with us and struggling to make, to discuss with us software engineers. It's tough. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paola. So I think we have quite a bit of time for the discussion, and I will invite people to ask their questions. Please raise your hand if you want to ask questions. We'll also go through the questions in the chat. So Alan, would you like to start the discussion with your question?
Yes, sure. Can you hear me, Paola?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your talk, which I thought was absolutely fascinating, and I very much enjoyed it. I had a question about sort of the way you set up the issue. So existing transportation systems are not sensitive to divergent moral ideals. So if I get in my car and drive to the roundabout, and there's a utilitarian coming the other way, and there's a virtue ethicist to my left and a deontologist to my right, that sort of doesn't really matter, because we all have to obey a common frame of regulations.
Yeah.
And I don't get, it doesn't, yeah. So a liberal society is an elaborate form of construction that permits people with very different moral ideals to share a social space. And there's a core of morality that's simply about providing stable, regular expectations. So why, when we think about autonomous systems, do our problems suddenly get any harder? I'm kind of thinking we don't have taxis for Catholics and taxis for secularists and taxis for liberals. And so why do we want to be able to plug in ideals and preferences into a kind of public, regulated, shared system?
So if I can answer to you, I mean, I would say that what you are referring to, it's hard ethics for me. So hard ethics does not mean only that it's law, but it's established regulation, established convention, established, no? So it's something that we all agree on. So I would say that that is hard ethics and is not subject to fluctuation depending on our morality. So hard ethics is embedded in the car, and it should follow that. So, but your question is interesting anyhow, because it says, you know, it goes to the point is, where do we put the border in between what is our right in terms of freedom of choice and what is not? And my point is exactly that the discussion has to be exactly in that border. So what we have in and what we have out. It's not that whether the car is, you know, totally controlled or uncontrolled. No, I mean, it's to me what is what I'm worried of is that I think that we run the risk of, you know, the more we get surrounded by autonomous systems that make our life very simple, because they help us from the washing machine, no, to I don't know, to the coffee machine, to the car, to the PC, no, and we all become the same. We lose our identity, no? I don't know if can I don't know. Is it comprehensible what I'm trying to say? So imagine the washing machine. The washing machine, it's a huge, nice stuff. No, now this in the old washing machine, we could set something, set the temperature, set the amount of soap, no, this kind. Now, the more they become autonomous, no, because they are able to optimize this and that, the less we are involved in. This is nice, no? Maybe it is nice. Maybe not. It's not always nice. Maybe I really want to exercise the fact that sometimes I don't want to put the soap at all, or I don't know. You know what I mean? I mean, so it's not the it's not that, but I am worried that the machines will govern on us. And I have not that worry, but I have the worry of uniformity. I have the worry of laziness. I have the worry of, losing even the idea that we could exercise a choice, and we have no more the chance to do that. And that is, and I would like this choice to come out somehow.
All right, so Amel, would you like to ask your question, Amel?
Yes, thank you, Paola, for the presentation. Just a quick question, actually, because in the beginning you mentioned values, and I wonder whether you can comment on the relationships between values and ethical preferences.
But ethical preferences are values. I mean, it's the kind of values we all try to follow more or less consistently, and that are not under any law or established rule constraint. And maybe our religion, or maybe our attitude towards other people, maybe our social behavior, maybe, and these are different, and I think we shall be able to lift up, at the digital level, this kind. I mean, the project is called Exosoul exactly because we think of an exoskeleton for the soul, for your values, not for for your strength or for your like an artificial arm. No, I'm not thinking of that, but I'm thinking of being able to make visible what are my dispositions, let's say, my orientations, that otherwise might become all flattened under the implementation of some developer that might be very fair, but maybe it's not like me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paola. So, Michael, would you like to ask your question? If not, I can read this question that
yeah, there are many questions.
Michael has asked. So he was asking about whether you consider soft ethics of a group in addition to those of an individual. For example, do you consider the soft ethics of a bus full of people in the parking lot versus an individual's car?
Yeah, I mean, I consider, in the sense that when we discussed about soft ethics and we were talking about individuals, groups, or societies, no? So I mean, not in terms of what we are actually doing now. Now we are actually experimenting with individuals, not with groups. But I assume that this is something that comes out very easily, because it's at the end what a society express, or what groups express.
All right. Zoe?
Hi, thank you for your talk. I would like to ask two practical but not technical questions. So the first one is, I mean, I have lots of questions, but I'm just going to ask you these two. So the first one is, how and when do you capture this information about the user preferences? And how so when do you do it? Do you do it at the point of purchase? Do you do it at the point of design or development? And how do you do it? Do you ask people a list of hypothetical scenarios? Do you give people a list of hypothetical scenarios for the particular domain in which the autonomous system will be working, and ask them what their responses would be? And if you do that, given that these are hypothetical scenarios, what if the user, if one of those situations were to materialize, changes their mind? How would they then be able to exercise their own autonomy to make the system? And I'm imagining an autonomous car, but I presume it would work for others. How would they make it do what they wanted? So that's the first question. And the second is, I was just thinking about some of the implications and normative consequences of a system like this. So say, for example, if you're somebody who chooses the less virtuous option of not being a particularly considerate or polite driver, or not being very generous, would you pay a higher insurance premium? Or would you be more open to legal liability or something like that if you were to cause an accident? And if that were the case, would it then indirectly become a hard ethics issue?
Okay, so thank you very much. So, by the way, this is what is difficult, no? I mean, now, which kind of approach are we following? We are following this bottom-up, top-down approach, no? So, top-down, bottom-up. So, top-down, it's like you said. So, we imagine, first of all, exoskeletons are conceived as personal pieces of information. So, are like personal data at the end. So, they are your own data that either you disclose or not. So this answers partially to your question. It's not observable if you are, you know, if you have a bad attitude or a good one towards something, unless you want to declare it. But let's do first the first question. So what we imagine is that at the very beginning, a user has to train its moral profile, no? Like you do with Siri or whatever, no? Now, how do you train, and what are we trying to do? First, have a characterization in terms of high-level ethical categories using an approach like a questionnaire that submit to you a certain number of questions that are general. At the moment we are working with these human basic value scenario and enriched with something in the digital. And then once you get this high level characterization, we think of a bottom-up phase in which actually what you do in terms of in the domain that you have chosen, what you do in practice can allow to refine your moral profile, no? So like it happens in practice in profiling. Here, what is difficult? It is difficult to identify what to monitor. So like when you are profiled for the kind of, I mean, if you like shoes, no? I mean, you look at free web sites in which you look at shoes, and then immediately our profiling systems in our phones, in our PC are able to get that you look at shoes and then blah, blah. So at the same time, in the same way, we try to model to characterize in the domain that we have chosen, which is the mobile domain and the automotive domain, the kind of actions that can have a meaning from an ethical point of view, and then monitoring how do you react in practice can refine your profile, okay? So this might be, we don't know yet because we are experimenting now. This may be simulated or may be done in practice. We'll see, no? I mean, for sure, we will start simulating and then we will do the rest. The normative implications exist. For example, when we discussed this project with people from industry, they immediately said, this can solve one problem of liability because if we share, no, if I download on the car part of my decision, whatever is the decision, no, I mean, but I to some extent I put some of my control in the car, then you can be liable and not the car can, no. So this might actually solve it. On the other hand, I think it makes sense. So it's, I don't know, I think I've answered more or less.
Thank you, Paola. So, Griselda, do you want to ask one of your questions?
Yes, thank you, Paola. It's really, really interesting. And also I have a lot of questions in my mind. But the first one is, let me check my chat. besides AI and data protection, I've read that there's hardly any hard digital ethics that apply for the specific domains. So it is up to the developer to encode all these ethical constraints, even if they don't want to encode any of this, it's okay, and would be totally legal. How does specific domains should be approached to consider them ethical?
So I'm not sure I did understand your question, but are you saying that at the moment there is no law that that deals with ethical values that are not privacy or personal data? No,
exactly. So
okay.
So for instance,
so at the moment there is no law. However, for example, in Europe, it's expected very soon. A legislation that actually puts requirements on the way AI systems, so let's say now, again, with this ambiguity in between AI and autonomous systems are developed, having in mind that one of the requirements is this transparency of decision or accountability. So there is a lot of research that is going on now about what is called explainable AI. So it's very, I think that it's very possible that the new legislation will actually ask for having a development that makes explicit the motivation for a certain decision. And this goes in the direction of what you said. On the other hand, it might also be that the new legislation will ask for the system, when it is a decision support system, for example, to be fair, which means that as not to be biased towards some category or another category or things like that. So I think that we are moving towards that direction, actually faster than we imagine.
Okay, thank you.
So I think I'll read a question that interests me as well from Sonia, who had to leave the seminar early. So she was asking, what do we do given that identifying the issues surrounding soft ethics requires long-term studies? And how can we carry out these long-term studies when research robots are not certified to be used outside labs? So we seem to have this dilemma of having to interact with users to identify the soft ethics, but we cannot interact with users.
So, I mean, actually, we don't need robots, no? We just need a phone. Maybe, no? So I agree, but we need long-term studies. And but my point is that at a certain point, we have to start. And what was disappointing in the overall approach was that, to me, was that this individual perspective was not considered. So the whole issue about soft ethics, it's exactly in that direction, no? Trying to enhance, empower the user. Empower means, I mean, if I can dialogue in terms of how can I dialogue with an autonomous systems au pair, so that I can actually be able to sustain my moral preferences. Now, the way I've told it to you is that we think of adaptable systems to some extent, not to customizable system. But you can also imagine that through this software, which is proprietary and it's your own software, you can actually be able to engage in an interaction which is more complex than just saying, okay, accept my soft ethics and do what I want. No, so that's the whole point. Now that you need studies, I agree. On the other hand, you know what? I mean, sometimes I get this, this is not feasible, it's difficult, and so on. 5 years ago, we didn't even imagine where we could have been, where we are now. And our systems have already a profiling capacity, which is impressive and also a little bit embarrassing. So I don't think that attempting to design your moral preferences is that different or impossible than your food preferences or dress preferences or whatever. No.
Thank you, Paola. So I think we are reaching the last few questions. Colin, and then Mauro, and then Federico. So Colin.
Thank you, Paola. Fascinating as always to hear you speaking. My question is, it follows on a little bit from what was said there. I think of myself at 18 and myself now much older and think how my own ethics have changed. And I think also the way I act varies by who I am relating with. And I wonder how those sort of things can be incorporated into this. Specifically, I was thinking about the nature of trust and authority and the need for an obligation for action if information is shared. I wonder if you had any thoughts on how those things might be incorporated.
Yes, I mean, actually, what we just started working with another group in Italy, and they are working on explainable AI. And actually, what we were thinking of, and we submitted a proposal on that, an Italian proposal. So it was exactly to, if we are able to provide a certificate associated to our autonomous systems that to some extent gives a measure of some of the qualities, ethical qualities that the system has, following the 5 requirements of that I mentioned. Even a quantity, this might allow a better and more maybe more complex interactions, through in order to reach the moral agreement that might actually allow you to build a trust. So, for example, just in the parking lot, I might say, okay, I would like to disclose that I have health problems, but I mean, who am disclosing this information? What is your certificate saying about your privacy concerns? Are you a system with a high privacy certification? Then I might be willing to exchange this piece of information, which is what we do, by the way. I mean, so I think that this goes in the direction that you were mentioning, and puts together these 2 lines of research that might seem diverting. One that has to do with the software that is associated with the individuals or the groups of a society in terms of users, and the one to the system. So it's.
Thank you.
So Mauro.
Hi, Paola. Thank you for the inspirational talk. It reminds me some discussion that we had years ago about Hamid, let's say. Yeah. Maybe the others don't know about that, but you can understand. So apparently here we have 2 autonomous systems that interact each other, which is the user side, let's say, and the server side.
Yeah.
It seems that the user, the exoskeleton, should learn about the system is interacting with, and vice versa, in order to achieve the soft ethics imposed by the client side. And then you mentioned about profiling. So doesn't this open another ethical issue? I mean, profiling the ethics of the users. which I mean can be possibly infinite, because you say that they are individual. Then every single user might have a different ethics, and then the intelligent system should learn all the different ethics from all the different users in order to learn how to deal with them.
Yeah, but it's not. Yeah, actually, Ami can make a role here, but it's not that the system has to learn. The system has to adapt. The system has to accommodate. It's not to learn.
But
so,
you mentioned about profiling.
Profiling is the user. How do you build the piece of software that models your own ethics? It's like profiling. Okay. So it's a self-profiling. Let's say self-profiling. So what we are trying to experiment is self-profiling. So when you build your own software for you, I mean, imagine that I produce this piece of software, and like your own Siri that will implement your soft ethics, and I give it to you, and then you start training it. Okay, you start training it by answering to some questions that it gives, and then saying, okay, now let's see how I behave, and learn and refine, and so on and so forth. So it's profiling the piece of exoskeleton that it's on board on you, on yourself. Okay, I mean, when I say on board on yourself, I mean on your devices, on your whatever, even on yourself if you have a chip under the skin. But and that while system side, the system has only to accommodate, has to be willing to accommodate your preferences. No. So let us imagine if you have a bus, and imagine that if I sit, I cannot raise till I reach the end. This is okay, it's a bus, it's fine, no? But it doesn't allow me to raise and leave the seat before I reach the end. And then this means that if somebody else get in and I would like to leave my seat, the bus does not allow me. This is a not flexible bus. I'm exaggerating. I'm just using the bus example, just to, okay? It's fair because I got in, the seat was free, I sat. But it's imposing a moral choice that is not mine. Okay? So that's the idea.
Yeah, sorry if, but shouldn't the autobus be able to accommodate
exactly.
but then there might be infinite
there might be infinite, but I mean, it's if the system is built in such a way that can accommodate, let's think of extra requirements in the decision. Let's imagine that you have your own rules to produce a decision. Then other rules from the user come, and these rules of the user have a priority with respect to your default rules. No? Of course, we are assuming that they are consistent, blah, 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 blah. But no? And then this means, okay, I accept the user rule and I make the decision following the user rule.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Mauro and Paola. And last but not least, Federico.
Yes, good afternoon. Thanks for the talk. It was really, really interesting. My question was related to the soft ethics modeling procedure. And you partially answered when you talked about the top-bottom and bottom-up approach. But I was wondering if, considering an autonomous system, what was the best approach? Because for the autonomous system to gather the information on its own, or to rely on an interaction with the user. So, for instance, in the parking plot example, if you can see the pin, maybe describing that the other passenger has a disease or health issues, this is an information that you can gather with a camera, for instance, but it could be more difficult to just interact with the user and ask if there are additional constraints to the current situation. But this second approach could be easier, but relying on the fact that the passenger, that the user, is compliant with the hard ethics. So I was just wondering if this was an issue that you considered, and how was the best trade-off in this solution?
No, I mean, it's first of all, the autonomous system to some extent is passive. No, I mean, it's the piece of software that represent the exoskeleton that is on board with you, that actually tries to interact with the autonomous systems, and the autonomous system has to be willing to accept it. Now, in the case of a parking lot, the piece of information is not captured by the autonomous system, because the autonomous systems, to some extent, yeah, but it might be a solution like, you know, I have on board some virtue guy, so I become hypersensitive to some extent, no? It's like a requirement, I become hypersensitive, and then in order to see if I can do something good for somebody else. But this is maybe too much, no? Just think that you are there, the other passenger decides to disclose its piece of information, like when a woman puts a pin in, no, on her dress, and then you receive this piece of information, and now you push the brake. Your virtue ethics, your soft ethic pushes the brake. And as a priority, as I was telling to Mauro, as a priority on the other action that was the default action to start, to continue go on. But of course, there are a lot of possibilities.
Right, thank you, everyone. So there are more questions in the chat, but we do need to stop here, I believe. So thank you so much, Paola, for a most insightful seminar, and thank you everyone for attending and participating in the discussion, for asking questions.
And I can answer if I get, how can I get the questions?
I'm saving the chat, and
then you can send it to me, I can.
Yes, well, the people who have a few questions unanswered heard you, so you will receive their emails as well, I would imagine.
Okay, this is much better. Okay.
Thank you for offering to continue to answer our questions. So I hope everyone has a good rest of the week. Do stay safe, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at future seminars in our series. Thank you very much again, Paola.
Thank you, Radu. Thank you to everybody, and continue asking questions, that we can do very nice things together. Ciao, grazie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paolo, and thank you, Radu.
Ciao,
and bye-bye, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.